Hi, everyone. Thanks for everybody tuning in and all of those of you guys who are watching this as the recording. Here to talk about nutrition and specifically fat loss today. This has been a hot topic for a lot of people, and I figured why not get on here and talk about it and see if I can help some of you guys achieve maybe your goals that you've not been able to achieve for a long time, or speed some things up for you, or just get the wheels spinning in your brain and give you some tools for the future whenever you are ready to take this on, because it is something you do have to be ready for and willing to do. So fat loss, there's really two, maybe three major things I wanted to hit on before we dig into some different nutritional approaches that can work for fat loss. And the first thing is going to be commitment. If you are not committed fully, head in, you dove into it, it's going to be a difficult journey. So you need to really make the decision that you're going to be all in if you're really looking to lose fat. If you're not looking for major changes and you just want to clean some things up around the edges, maybe that level of commitment doesn't need to be there quite as strong. But if you're really wanting to lose weight and see some significant changes, you can't dance around some of this. You have to commit. Now, I'm not saying that if you fall off a little bit, if you mess up here and there, that it's the end, or that you can't follow through with it, or that it's not going to work. That's not what I mean, because that is going to happen, and it's inevitable that things are going to come up that maybe you don't want to follow your plan for, or that you just didn't for one reason or another. And the commitment level has to be there to the point to where, whether you have an off meal, an off day, or even an off week, that you're so committed to this that it won't completely derail you, that you will still get back to it and keep hammering and keep going hard. So you need to make that decision and make that commitment to yourself, and you're going to get the results with the same amount of effort that you put in. So if you're only, half-assing it, you're going to get half-ass results. So you really have to make that conscious decision to go all in and not let things get in your way. And if things do get in your way, you need to just still steamroll over them or past them, get through them, or start again. You just can't give up no matter what happens. The second thing is going to be looking at micronutrients. I think that gets lost on, we'll talk about some of these different diet approaches, and a micronutrient focus. Looks like my screen froze here. There we go. Okay. A micronutrient focus is so important. If we're not feeding our bodies the right micronutrients, we're not going to function like we should. So even if you're eating a good amount of protein, carbs, fat, but you're not getting a good nutritional profile, you're not getting a lot of phytonutrients in, you're not getting a lot of vitamins and minerals in, your body is not going to work optimally. We need to feed it all of these proper nutrients, and we also need our gut to have a good variety of microorganisms in there so that it can work correctly. Our gut is really like our second brain. It's related to our mood, it's related to heart health, it's related to blood sugar levels. It is linked to so much, even joint pain, even fat loss and metabolism. So if we don't have our gut under control, if we're not getting the right micronutrients, you could still be dieting hard, but only getting limited results. So those things are very important, and something that you should consider if you're wanting to make some major changes, or maybe if you even want some small changes, you can get away with less hard work because those things are in order. So micronutrients and gut health really become very important when you're looking to lean out and lose some fat. So fat loss comes down to thermodynamics, which is how much you're burning. So if you are burning more calories daily or even weekly, sometimes you can step back and take a look, because day to day doesn't completely tell the whole story. But if you're burning more than what you're taking in, you should be losing weight. Sometimes that doesn't totally work because hormones play a factor in that. Not only just talking about like menopausal hormones, which I just had a conversation with some people about that, but that can play a role, but also just you can turn on and off your fat burning hormones. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. So if we're just not moving enough, that's going to impact your overall thermodynamic use and what's going on there. So if I'm not moving enough and not quite eating the right things and eating a little too much, we're going to be out of balance. And that's where either you're just going to stay the same all the time, or you're going to see yourself slightly gaining some weight. And if you're doing it in the right direction, you should see yourself losing some weight and leaning out. So let's talk about some different diet approaches, and I'll kind of go over the pros and cons of them. And I'm not saying that you have to follow a specific diet to lose fat, but it can help just because it gives you some guidelines. And also, I think there are different dietary approaches that tend to complement maybe your lifestyle or your mindset more than others, that make it easier to follow, which sets you up for success. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that I want to talk about and go into. My screen is freezing a little. I hope I'm doing okay on your end. So I also want to say I have tried all of these, so I'm not just speaking out of my ass. I've tried them all, so I really do truly understand the pros and cons of them, and can share this not only from just my experience, but other clients who have tried these things and just research. So I hope that maybe 1 or 2 of these speaks to you, and you can try it and see what you think. And if it feels like it jives and vibes with your lifestyle, thanks for the feedback that the video is good. Appreciate that. Because like I said, you need to commit. So just willy-nilly doing a few different things here and there, how are you going to know if it's working? So what I would advise you to do is maybe pick one and commit hardcore for, I'd say, 2 to 3 months. That's where I usually see people starting to really learn, figure things out, get to the point where it's becoming easier and more of a habit. And then you really start to see how your body responds to it. You can't try something for a few weeks and totally judge it from that. So the first one I wanted to talk about was the paleo diet. I feel like that gained a lot of popularity about 15 years ago. It really started to emerge, and it's eating like supposedly our ancestors did, which you eat whole foods, so lots of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and lean meats. But we cut out grain, dairy, and processed foods. So it is a great diet because it really does get a lot of nutrients in. It's a nutrient-dense diet. It gets a lot of fiber in. It gets you a good amount of protein, and it really just cleans things up. So if you tend to eat more processed food, this can be a great way to clean it up for you. The issues that I have with it. So it can be a great fat loss diet if you're coming from a place where maybe you are eating a lot of processed foods and you switch to eating less processed foods. Typically, you are going to have less of a calorie intake in general, because processed foods are pretty big bang for your buck as far as calories go. So it can help with that, but it's also, on the downside, easy to eat too many calories on. Not too much volume, but what people tend to do with paleo is, since you can have a good amount of meat and nuts and seeds, it's easy to eat too much of that stuff, and that will really hinder your fat loss. Fat in 1 gram of fat, there's 9 calories, and it adds up very quickly versus a gram of a carbohydrate that has only 4 calories in it. So you can eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and see some great fat loss changes and even lean proteins. But if you're eating more of the fattier proteins and you're really leaning into the nuts and seeds, that's where you can get into trouble with it. And it can feel restrictive for some people, where it feels like you're all in and really avoiding processed food like it's the devil. And it's not good, but you don't want to get to that point where it's causing some triggers to happen for you. The next diet that I want to go into is the keto diet. That one has really started to gain some popularity, and it can help with fat loss. And I see a lot of people lose a lot of weight quickly with that. So the keto diet is low carb, high fat, and low protein. A lot of people think keto is just eating really low carb, but that's not true keto. True keto is when you are eating a lot. The bulk of your calories are from fat, and your protein, you're only at like 5 to 20% of your calories come from protein. So it's a really low protein, low carb or no carb diet and very high fat. So you're trying to essentially get your body to run off of fat as an energy source versus carbohydrates. And this does cause quick fat loss because it is a restrictive diet. You are cutting out a complete macronutrient of carbohydrates. So people tend to get less calories. And then another thing that is, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You can control your blood sugar very well with the keto diet because you're not eating carbohydrates. But the problem with it is that is just a symptom. If I have a blood sugar issue and my body can't handle eating sugar well, when I eat that, my blood sugar is going to spike. If I'm eating carbohydrates, my blood sugar is going to spike. So if I cut that out, then it is going to control my blood sugar, my insulin levels. So it can help control that, and that can help you lose fat. But what happens when you get off of keto? Because it's not a very realistic long-term diet. So what's happening is then when people are starting to work carbohydrates back in, it's really hard to keep the weight off, and you still see the same problems return with insulin levels. So it's not a fix. It's really just working with the symptoms of it. So you need to just be careful and be aware of that. It's a very low fiber diet, which is not good for our gut health and for digestion and going to the bathroom. So those are just some things to be aware of. So it can be a quick fix. It can be a quick way to lose some weight, but just you have to be really careful when you're coming out of it. I've tried it myself. It was really hard. I felt horribly. And it really destroyed my stomach. So I'm personally not a big fan of it, but I do know several people who've had really great success with it and stuck with it long term. So you could try it if you want. Just use some caution, research a lot if you do. Whole food plant-based, that's another approach. So that is where you're eating all whole foods. So think Mother Nature. We're eating all plants and it's unprocessed. So that means no oils. And that's a big difference with this whole food plant-based diet, is that you're not eating oils in there. We're not getting any processed sugars in there. And there's no animal proteins either. So this diet, it's rich in fiber. It really helps with your digestion. You're getting a lot of the micronutrients in there. It does help with weight management because in itself, it tends to be a lower calorie diet since you really are limiting a lot of what you eat. It can be difficult when you're eating out and traveling until you get really well versed in it and start to understand how you can eat and stop being shy at restaurants and going out to eat about asking for them to modify or what other options they might have for you. But it's a very healthy diet. It really is good for heart health and just it's a good diet. It's not, there's nothing in regards to portion control with it. So kind of like I was saying with paleo, you can still overdo it with this one. We're not eating animal protein, so that we're not talking about overeating that and gaining some weight, but it would be more towards the nuts and seeds, which you want to not overdo. So that's where you can run into a little bit of a hiccup with the whole food plant-based diet. But generally, people do seem to lose weight on that diet, and it's a very healthy diet. Next up, fasting. This has also been something that's gained a lot of popularity in the last 10 years or so. And there's intermittent fasting, which has probably been the most popular approach to this, where people will eat, for example, in a 6-hour window and then fast for the next 16 hours. And it is a way of eating that gives your body a chance to rest, to have some good cellular repair. It can help with your insulin sensitivity. That being said, it also does not look into what you're eating. It's more about when you are eating. So you really have to be mindful of what you're eating in that 6-hour window, and you need to make sure you're eating enough. And a lot of people tend to undereat when they're fasting, which initially can work and you can see some good weight loss, but it seems that can over time slow down your metabolism, and you don't want your body to think you're starving. So you need to make sure in your feeding window times that you are getting in enough food. And that can be hard if you have a shorter eating window. So if you're going to try fasting, be mindful of what you're eating, because you need to get a lot of the nutrients in, micronutrients and macronutrients. You really have to work pretty hard to make sure that you're eating really well during your eating windows. This does seem to, like I said, cause people to eat less. So you do see some weight loss with it. It's a pretty simple rule to follow. That's one thing that's nice about fasting. It's not tons of guidelines that you need to follow. Some negative things, though, it can be triggering. I find that probably 90% of women that I work with have had some point of disordered eating in their lives, and it can be really triggering to do fasting for women. So it's usually not something I advise women to try, even if women haven't had an issue with eating disorder or disordered eating in the past. It can really mess with your cortisol and kind of get your body into this fight or flight stress state, and can cause some problems down the road. So fasting for men seems to go better, and men tend to have less issues with disordered eating, but not always. But just be aware of those things. Okay, I've got 3 more to go over. One is sugar fasting. So this is not fasting from sugar. This is like intermittent fasting, but instead of having your windows of not eating at all, you're eating only simple carbohydrates, and carbohydrates that are heavier on the sugar or glucose side. So things like fruit juice, honey, maple syrup, and even table sugar. And you eat that with no fat, no protein for a significant portion of the day or days. And what that does when you eat just these simple sugars with the absence of fat and protein, it turns on this hormone called FGF21, which actually starts to burn fat. And it uses those simple carbohydrates and your body fat as fuel. And you can really see some quick fat loss results with this. So you can do your sugar fasting through the whole first part of the day. And then once you get to your dinner, you eat a really low fat, higher protein, and whatever you want for carbohydrate dinner to break the fast. And then you continue that day after day until you are starting to achieve your results, or you could go even faster and do a whole day or a couple days or a few days, or even up to really about 5 days of sugar fasting, and then have your day where you pack in the protein and some fat and other carbohydrates, starchier, more complex carbohydrates, to kind of fill your stores up for the week. But that tends to be a quick way to lose body fat. It's a nice way if you do feel like you are more of a sweets type of a person, where you can kind of get that fix. I'm not promoting to eat candy and sugar, but there is room for that in that diet. So it can help people stick to it a little more long-term because it's not quite as restrictive. You get a good amount of fiber with it and nutrients because you're eating lots of fruit. Some of the downsides, long-term, it can be hard for people to stick to. It can also be a triggering type of a diet if you've had any disordered eating in the past, where it can feel overly restrictive. But I have seen really good results with it. That's something I've been playing with since springtime this year, and I really have enjoyed it and seen really good results from it. And it really makes me crave cooked vegetables and protein, which I think is a good thing to be craving. So let's move on. 2 more. 800 grams. So this is by a nutritionist who started this diet approach. It's called the 800 gram challenge. We've done this several times at the gym. I love this approach. It's not necessarily a fat loss diet, but a lot of times it ends up helping people lose fat. So what you do with this nutritional approach is you try to get in 800 grams, and that's in weight, not in like grams of carbs. That's like a food scale weight, 800 grams of produce every day, fruits and vegetables. And that's really the only guideline. You have to get that in, and then you fill in the rest with your other foods. So I like this because it's not cutting anything out. It's all about adding in. Can you add in 800 grams of produce every day? And usually you don't have room for junk. It crowds out the junk. So it's a great way to clean up your nutrition. It's a little less strict than paleo because there aren't dietary restrictions, but you do tend to get filled up on the 800 grams. It gets you tons of nutrients, tons of fiber. But again, it's not designed specifically for fat loss, but it might be a good stepping stone for people who need to clean up their nutrition but aren't ready to go all in paleo or a whole food plant-based. This is a good stepping stone to start. It's a great approach. I really have enjoyed it, and I know our members have too. Just if you do it and you're not seeing fat come off, that's when you need to start looking into what else you're eating besides the 800 grams. So the last approach I want to talk about would be macros, counting your macros and macronutrients. That's your proteins, carbs, fats. You get an assigned number to hit every day. So you're going to hit a certain amount of protein every day, a certain amount of carbohydrates every day, and a certain amount of fat grams every day. And it's flexible. You can eat whatever you want as long as you get those numbers at the end of the day. It really teaches you portions. It teaches you kind of how to learn what your body needs to get into a fat burning or even a muscle building zone. And it can be customizable dependent on your physical activity level and your goals, how aggressive you want to be, things like that. Some of the downsides to it would be that you have to track. So you're using most of the time an app for every single thing you put in your mouth. You have to record, you have to weigh, you have to measure every single thing. It can be triggering because it feels very controlled. And there's no rules about quality of food on it. So you could really eat a junk food diet and somehow fit your macros, and you will still see fat loss if you've hit your macros, even eating less ideal food, but you're missing out, like I talked about earlier, on those micronutrients, and that in the long term will bite you in the butt. So if you do macros, be mindful of the quality of foods that you're eating. So that was a lot of diets to go over, but I hope that was at least a good overview for you to maybe hear or realize what sounds good to you, what sounds not good to you. Maybe you learned a little bit of something in there. And there's a lot more to it. I mean, I know we've been on this call a half hour already, but we could talk hours on each of those nutritional approaches. So just take what I said with a grain of salt, because there's a lot more out there about all of those. So let's say you've been following a nutritional plan for a couple months, and notice I said a couple months, right? You're not gonna, with these diets and nutritional approaches, it's not gonna be a week. You're gonna be down 5 pounds already, which you may, if you have a lot to lose or you're making a major change, that can happen, but don't expect a miracle, right? This is something that you have to commit to and do long term. So say it's been a couple months and maybe you did drop 5 pounds or so, but it's just not going very quickly. It's not going the direction you want it to. So you need to step back and look at things. Is this really fitting your lifestyle? Are you really doing it correctly? Have you really committed all in? Can you really sit back and look at the past 2 months and say that you've tried your hardest and that you've made major consistent changes? Because even if you say, I've tried my hardest, but every Saturday night I'm having pizza, chips, and 5 beers, is that really, I know you tried your hardest, but is that the best situation? Probably not. Could you clean that up? Could you try harder? So be realistic and hold yourself accountable. Because I think so many times people say, oh, I did this new workout program, I did this new nutrition program, and it didn't work for me. It was terrible. Well, did you really go all in? I feel like you can't say something works or doesn't work until you're 100% in and you see if it works. So go all in and try it out and see what happens. If you're not losing fat, I mean, you still could be having too little of movement. You can lose body fat without exercising, but it is going to be completely magnified if you're training a lot. And it's not just cardio. You do need strength training. Strength training is going to, it's like steroids for fat loss. You're going to burn so many more calories, and it continues burning after your workouts. Cardio, not quite so much. So get your strength training in. That will make a big difference. And then I did have a couple of questions. I think I did cover a few of those with what I was saying. So those of you guys who asked, I hope some of the things I brought up there covered it. I had a question about pre and post workout nutrition. So when you are looking at what to eat before and after your workouts, you need to really eat super low to no fat before and after your workouts. Before your workouts, fat is going to slow down your digestion. That's going to be glugging around in your belly, which does not feel good. And then also it slows down digestion, which means nutrients aren't getting into your system as quickly. And it's good to eat simple carbohydrates, and you can even do protein pre-workout. So a good thing to do would be maybe like a protein shake, because it's super easily digestible, but also throw in some easily digestible carbohydrates in there. So maybe it's like a fruit juice, or maybe make like a protein smoothie with some fruit in there, but some type of carbohydrate source, even sugar, honey, maple syrup, something that's going to get in your bloodstream quickly without having to do a lot of digesting. So we don't want a whole lot of fiber before you work out, and we don't want a whole lot of fat before you work out. Post-workout is a great time to eat high carbs. Your body's like a sponge. So you can handle getting in more dense carbs, higher complex carbs. You can get in like your sugary stuff during that time too. And I'm not talking just candy. You know, you can load up as far as carbohydrates go, have a sweet potato and drizzle a ton of honey on there or whatever you need to get a good amount of carbs in. And just like I said earlier, low fat, because it slows down digestion. And after your workout, you're wanting to fuel your body. So get in some good carbs, don't have a lot of fat so that it can get into your system quickly, and get some good protein in, and just watch that your protein is also lower in fat at that point. But that's your opportunity to get in the bulk of your carbohydrates for that day, and they will be used well at that point. Another question that I had was as far as hormones go and how much of an impact hormones can have on fat loss. And it does impact it for sure. So specifically for women, you know, whether you are postpartum, perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, that can affect your fat loss and make it a lot harder. So unfortunately, you have to be way more zoned in and perfect with what you're doing, or maybe look into checking on your hormones and seeing, you know, where they can be balanced a little bit better, because that does have an impact on fat loss for sure. So that's probably not the answer that you were wanting to hear, but some of those diets you can really play with to get those fat burning hormones fueled a little bit faster could help in those instances if you're really struggling. So maybe those could be something you could look into and try. If any of you have any additional follow-up questions, feel free to send them to me. I also love doing one-on-one coaching with nutrition. We're going to be doing some things coming up for the new year with nutrition. If you guys are looking to do more of a gym challenge type of an approach. But I love geeking out on this stuff. I love experimenting on myself and seeing what works and what doesn't for me, so that I can give other people advice and tips and tricks down the road. But if that's something you're interested in, I'd love to help you out. Tim also is really good with nutrition. Dawn and Nan also have geeked out on this stuff too, and would be great people to talk to about nutrition. So we all love it. And I know some of our other part-time coaches too, we all live, breathe, eat, and sleep this stuff. So let us know if you guys have questions. But I am going to end there, and I appreciate you guys tuning in. And I can't wait to do another one of these calls on another topic. And if you have any topics, please suggest, and maybe we'll go with yours in the future. Thanks for coming.